Welcome back, everybody. I hope that you were able to get refreshed with coffee and cake and you were able to network. And welcome back to our online audience. We've seen that so many of you have come from all corners of Europe for this conference on the internationalization of the profession. And we know that there is interest in working abroad. According to the A sector study, 16% expressed interest, but there are concerns. And as you see on the slide here, when you registered, you were asked, what are your challenges when exporting? And you can see that a lot is about local laws and rules, which was exactly why the Architects Council of Europe got the best heads together and to work out how can we encourage more architects to work abroad? What are the tools? What are the guidelines? What are the services that they need? And they set up the Internationalization and New Business Models Working Group. Not so easy to say, but I'm delighted that we have got the three experts and members of that working group with us. Dr. Philip STEDEN, Head of Unit Economic Policy, the German Federal Chamber of Architects, Jacques BORG from the Maltese Chamber of Architects and Civil Engineers, and Gergely SANDOR from the Chamber of Hungarian Architects. So each of our speakers is going to talk about a service, a publication, the website that can help you internationalize your business. We'll then have a little bit of a discussion between the three of us and go to your questions. So if you're joining us online, please do put questions in the Zoom. Here, there will be a microphone that goes round. So with no further ado, I'd like to ask Dr. Philip STEDEN to talk about the website that's being created.
Yeah, it's working. Okay, thank you, Dual, Claire, and also thank you for the invitation to be invited here and to speak. Before I go to the website, I just want to introduce the work group. As I learned today, it's not a task force, it's a work group. And no matter what the difference exactly is. But what is the work group doing? It was founded in 2017, and why? That was because at this time, everybody knew globalization is a reality for architects when talking about future. But unfortunately, not very many architects, just a few architects are really working abroad. And so we thought it's time to found a working group that consists of architects like my two colleagues, but also some people with a business background or economists like I am. And so I think it's a good mix to deal with internationalization. And the task what we set as our goal was not to do studying and analyzing and producing reports. It was more to be helpful to practicing architects and to invent tools like a toolbox to really upskill architects to be globally competitive and to be able to work abroad. And of course, we know there's a big difference between big firms and smaller ones, those who are experienced in exporting and those that are newcomers. And so we try to address all these. Now, that was the starting point. You see just 6% of architectural firms are really active abroad. And when it comes to revenue, you see it's just a little amount. We estimate from the sector study of ACE that just around 2% of revenues derive from markets abroad. So that's not a lot compared to other industries, but for architects, it's quite okay. And we're talking about later how the quota developed in the last years. But my main task is to introduce to the website, because it's like an internationalization program, because we have many tools, many information, database, etc., that you can use and that we think are interesting to have a look at least a look at it. So that's the international web page. And does the pointer work? Yeah. You see at the right-hand side, there's an international section, and I just want to show you some slides, what you might find interesting. So the main page is just introducing the work group, where we come from, what our aims are, etc. But now it's getting more interesting. What can you find? One back again. What can you find here? For many of you, it might be interesting in case you want to change your job to find a job abroad. So there's a section jobs in Europe, and this is pretty interesting. You can choose a country, and then you find, for example, Austria. It's the example here. You can find all the associations and databases where you can look for a job for architects. When you're a young architect and before being self-employed, it might be interesting to look for traineeships in Europe, and we redirect to the national chambers, to websites where you might find a trainee position, and especially when we're looking on for international contracts. Of course, we have some definitions here, because for us it's really important that an internship or a traineeship is not just any practical experience. For us, it's important to state that it's under the supervision of a competent person. And of course, we have a code of conduct for employers to ensure adequate learning outcomes and avoid exploitation, because a traineeship is a really important period in your working life and should be used properly, and not, no one wants exploitation, of course. Let's keep on looking. What else do we have? This is hard to read, I know, but you don't have to read it all in detail. It's about market access, and we had the feeling that it's really complicated to find the right information on the right web page. There are tons of EU portals, etc., but you need some advice where to find what. And we have tried to do this here. So the market access information is about facts and figures. It's about the construction sector. You find many numbers, many economic indicators, but also it is good to find the EU portal, what is called Access to Markets. So that gives information for all the EU countries concerning taxes, procedures, single entry points, or trade agreements. So when you're interested in that, or you need to find it for your work, you will find it there. Also, you can be redirected to the European Enterprise Network. That's an EU-wide network, one of the largest export networks in the world, with regional offices in all the European regions. And it's this, for example, is interesting when you're applying for an EU grant or research project. They might help you to formulate your application. It becomes more concrete, even more concrete, when it comes to concrete business support. You will find all the information you need, be it the tenders portal, Tenders Daily, TED portal, when you're looking for procurement contracts or international ADCs, design competitions. You will be redirected to FX or NACS. These are networks, national networks, that help you to start working abroad, and we talk about this later this afternoon. So I keep it on this side. So this is one that really fascinates me when you want to have more specific country information. Country information. You find a map and you can click on each of the EU countries to find statistics, to find information important for architects. And I have an example. When you look at Portugal, what you might find here, it's about statistics for architects, but it's also about information when you want to work in Portugal. What about the professional title? What does it require to call yourself an architect? Do you have to register? How to do that, etc.? what's the case when it comes to liability and insurance? Is it the same as in your country or is it different? So these are very practical information that you need to know when you begin to work, when you begin working in Portugal. And you find these country information for all the EU countries. So I think it's very, very helpful. Okay, this is an example of country information, lots of statistics, how many architects are working in this country, is the market growing, how big is the construction industry, etc., etc. You see lots of numbers for those who are interested in the details. They might find the right information here. Also, one slide when you come to the question if the title architect is protected. We know there are differences across Europe, but here you find what the conditions are in Portugal, and you see, yeah, the title is protected, the function of an architect is also protected, and where and how to register to be able to work as an architect. This is one of the web pages that is clicked most often. In general, I've heard that ACE website has around 60,000 visitors a year. That's quite good, I think. And this is one of the web pages that is very much sought after. It is the process how to register in another country if you want to work there temporarily or on a permanent basis. And so it's a yes and no game. So you click through it. And in the end, you find out what you have to do and to which organization you have to turn to be allowed to work there. So yeah, it looks complicated, and I know it is complicated, and that's why you might find this chart instructive. I'm not talking about the reasons for working with European architects because my colleagues will do that. I just want to show you it's not only online, it's also a physical brochure that you might get from us. What I learned the last days, there are actually 2 versions of this brochure, and if you want to know why, you have to talk to us in the next break. Key message is also one thing my other colleague is going to talk about. This is also very practical. We have developed a checklist. If you want to work abroad, what should you consider? Where do you have to be careful? So we have 2 checklists. One checklist is called the architect client checklist, and the other one is called the architect checklist, because you might find it useful to work with a local architect to work together with him. And of course, you need a contract in 2 maybe quite different jurisdictions. But there are some common things you might pay attention to. And I think these checklists might be really helpful when it comes to cooperating. Very practical insurance fact sheets. You see the landscape of Europe, different conditions in different markets. But for each market, we have set up an insurance fact sheet. And you see, for example, is there a legal obligation to have an insurance? If yes, what kind of contractual liabilities? Are there liabilities after you have finished your work, and for how many years? The forms of insurance contracts, and helpful also insurance agents that might help you acquiring insurance in another market. So this is also one web page that is frequently clicked on. Okay, relevant legislation, I don't want to bore you with that, but we have a part of the web pages that turns to this questions. Also bibliography, we offer some help here where to find relevant documents or helpful documents. By example, the Doing Business report is done by the World Bank. They have a report for the whole world, but also for different countries. That might be helpful when you start doing business in a different market. It not only covers the EU, but also non-EU countries. And I think it's one of the really good things the World Bank does for us. Again, back to our web pages. When it comes to CPD, you might be interested in visiting or taking part in a course not in your home country, but abroad. So this is the right page to turn to. You can look for CPD events all over Europe. You can select one of the countries, and you will be directed to upcoming courses that you might find interesting. The last two slides, and I hope this is still within the 7 minutes that Claire gave, approximately. Okay, then I speed up. There's a relaunch.
No, don't speed up. That has no impact. But
okay, but it is one of the last slides, anyways. And yeah, the web page will be updated this summer. It will have a fresh appearance and also some new features. And I think what is also interesting to know, there will be a mobile app from ACE, so that you can use it on your smartphone when you're traveling and have time on the airport to check it. And maybe then it's even used more frequently than it also is today. So that's it from my side, and I pass it over to who's next?
Jacques, yes, indeed. Thank you very much for that overview of all the features of the website and, of course, the new app. Jacques is going to dig a bit deeper on the checklist that Philip was talking about. So over to you, Jacques.
Thank you very much, Claire. Yeah, so those of you who came here for exciting graphics, now's your time. We're going to do checklists. See if this works. The slide mismatch, guys. Tech.
Okay.
Okay.
If you could remember what the slide was, you can fill in the gaps.
No, but this is actually Gergely's.
Okay, so you most probably, I would imagine you're going to have to go back a little bit, because there was some comments on checklists that Philip mentioned. Did they refer to you?
And yeah, the two checklist presentations, but I think the slides just need to be.
Okay.
They just need to bring up my set. Yeah, there they are.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, can we go full screen?
Could you put it full screen?
Yeah. Okay, we're good. Thanks. Okay, so these are the two checklists that Philip mentioned earlier that the working group has been working on. First one deals with the relationship between the architect and the client. Those of you who work with into the mic, yeah, sorry. Those of you who work with contracts on a regular basis, a lot of this will not necessarily be new, but I do, and I still find it always useful to refer to checklists, because there's always things that we miss, or we get so used to it that there are things we omit. And those of you who don't, of course, this, I think, a very useful starting point. Of course, the checklist is a guide. It's not a contract, but it's a guide to formulating a contract with a client. Basically gives you general guidance on how to set a contract up, and it also contains a link to various national and international templates, which you can then find online, and allows you to see what the national templates look like, and what might be specific to the various jurisdictions that you might be working in. Of course, a contract is any contract that is binding legally between two parties, so that and involves an agreement. So somebody's offering you to do something and you accept it. There's an exchange of economic value, and there's an intention to enter that agreement. And that can also be something verbal. But of course, if it's verbal, it's very difficult to go back later and say, oh, this is what we agreed. So that's the nice thing about having something in writing, because it prevents misunderstandings later on, or at least it reduces the opportunities, I think, for misunderstandings later on, or for issues with interpretation later on. The contract checklist, I mean, this is a summary. Of course, the full checklist is on the website, but what should a contract fundamentally contain? Identity of the parties, definition of the terms that the parties are agreeing upon, the description of the assignment. What are you as the architect asked to do? What is within your terms of reference? What is not fundamentally therefore also within your terms of reference? Your obligations as an architect, how the project will be administered and the archiving duties of the project, references to professional standards and ethics, the obligations of the client. The client also has obligations in any agreement, how liability and insurance will be handled, how fees and expenses will be handled, copyright, which is also an important one. So who owns copyright? How is copyright managed? What are the obligations of the parties with respect to copyright? What happens when a project is suspended or terminated? was recently in Slovenia, and one of my colleagues mentioned, as it was a 13-year project, I think, that had been going on, and he said, well, as architects, we hurry to wait and wait to hurry, which I thought was symptomatic of so many projects we've worked on. So yes, suspension and termination are also important, and how to deal with them, what the obligations of the parties are in those situations, how disputes get resolved, and what is the applicable law, and especially with international contracts, that's a very important one. What laws do you, as an architect working in another jurisdiction, want to be working with or exposed to, and of course signatures. Otherwise, you're not endorsing that. So that's the basis of any contract, and certainly a contract checklist for working in foreign jurisdictions. Then we also speak, there's another checklist or another guide for architect collaborations. And also some guidance at the beginning on how to go about setting up a collaboration. So I think there's a tendency to work with people we like, and in any collaboration with a client, and especially with other architect, of course, trust is fundamental. So you want to be working with people you're comfortable working with. Trust is important. At the same time, if I work with you because I like you or because we're alike, it doesn't necessarily mean that we together achieve more than we achieve individually. So it's very important when we work internationally or we work in a collaboration that we find the right strategic match, that we bring something to the table and that the other party brings something to the table, and that between us, what we bring together is larger than the sum of our parts. And of course, that we achieve a reciprocal relationship which is beneficial to both parties. So I've been exposed to collaborations where there's a very, very important and reciprocal relationship with another architect, and somewhere also there's a sort of imposition of, okay, this is the way we do things because you're the local and we're the international, for example. So it's very important, I think, for that relationship to be correct on both sides. Also important to understand what the local requirements are in any situation where you're the foreign architect coming in. As we were saying also this morning, the importance of listening to local knowledge and understanding it, and also seeking synergy so that the collaboration, as we said, is stronger than the individual parts. There are various types of collaborations and what they might be. These are the four, shall we say, principal ones. Division of profit and loss, so where the parties share profit and share loss. Division of compensation, so the total fee is 100%. One party earns 60%, one party earns 40%, and then that's broken up over the different phases, for example, or 50%, whatever the right division is for the task at hand. Different architects for different phases. Usually there's a client choice, so the client will say, okay, we want the international to come in and do phase one, and then we want the local to come in and do all the rest, and the international to say follow phase one, for example. So usually in this case, the frame of collaboration is a bit reduced, and also the sort of international architect, local consultant, where the local is purely providing consultancy to an international, and again, there's a likelihood that that relationship might be asymmetrical. So that's really the four types of potential collaboration, and all of these, of course, need to be worked out depending on the nature of the task at hand, client requirements, and your requirements in dealing with the other architect that you're working with. And again, this is there as a tool to help to formulate those relationships. It's never a be-all and end-all, and in all cases, you want your consultants, your legal consultants, and so on and so forth, to help you in setting up the right agreement for the right context. Key steps in setting up a collaboration. First of all, determine whether a formal setup as an independent organization is required. So if I go into partnership with Philip in Germany, can we operate under our respective practice names, or do we need to set up a new company with a new entity? Or can we therefore act also as a joint venture, as a type of collaboration, number two? It's always very important to prepare a matrix to understand what the respective roles at the respective stages are. Who's responsible for leading what, who's responsible for delivering what, and to what extent, and therefore assigning the effort and the responsibility where needed. Keeping careful and transparent records, especially where you have division of profit and loss. I mean, I've only personally worked with division of compensation, which is a bit easier for both parties because you administer the part of the pot that you're working with, and as long as the split is fair, that's usually doable. Deciding who will sign the agreement with the client. Is this the agreement signed only by the principal, or is the agreement signed by both? And that might also deal with issues of local legislation. So who is who is the architect at law in that particular jurisdiction. Of course, review the insurance policies to make sure that they're appropriate. So you always need to consult with your insurance. And as we said before, consult your other consultants, your legal, your accounting, and so on and so forth, because it's an ever more complicated world out there as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacques. So we've had the website, we've got the checklist for collaboration. Don't just collaborate with people you like, but who complement you. And now Gergely is going to talk about some key messages and an export guide. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. I need some help finding my slides.
So I think you're just going to have to test it and see
now it works.
whether they are yours.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I would like to continue the presentation of our work group. Back in 2017, one of the reasons why this work group was created is that it was realized that for decades there have been separate intentions, institutions supporting exporting architectural services on a national level. But growing the EU, it had to be realized that this needs to be elevated to a higher level, this support. And for that reason, ACE established this IBM work group that we are all three working in it, in order to support the architects in Europe, how they could export their services within Europe, beyond the borders, but also beyond Europe. And we had lots of discussions within the work group. As you already saw, we did researches, collected data, and we found lots of obvious things, but we found also that it's a very complex issue if an architect wants to go abroad, because there are lots of challenges. And one of the documents, publications that we did, what are the reasons that one should work with a European architect? And we found values and qualities of architects that I think that could be beneficial all over the world if somebody is teaming up with a European architect. Of course, like words, tradition, heritage, or sustainability, or the approach to people and the planet, Bau culture, and other words like these are the strong basis of our European ethics and daily work. But you will see later the discussion that there may be cases where these words don't become so obvious. Of course, there are moments when this proud European architect is going to sign a contract and starting a business. But we realized, as it's also introduced by Jacques, that there are many conditions and things to be considered when you start working internationally. And for that reason, we prepared a guide to support the architects when they want to make their first steps going abroad. I don't know if you are aware, but once I heard a figure that the average size of a European architecture office is 1.6 person per office, so it's quite small. And to support these SMEs all over Europe, you have to imagine that there is one or two people covering all the responsible entrepreneurship jobs, sharing between each other, and it's quite complex if you take a look at that. On the first step, you are very happy if the opportunity arises, but this may happen in various ways. It may be an event that you are asked by your client to go abroad. You maybe didn't want to go abroad because you didn't want to do that. It's not your piece of cake. But there are other things like adapting to the market conditions, or you may also decide for strategic reasons that you want to go abroad. But all these scenarios end up in different issues and solutions. We believe on behalf of IBM that there are lots of benefits going abroad, and I would like to highlight just the the second highlighted words, that I think the best thing going abroad is meeting other people, other talents. And as it was also mentioned by Tobias this morning, that exchanging experiences, technical knowledges, cultural differences, that's, I think, one of the key things working with others and working abroad. I also used to say that if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, then go together. And this teaming up sense is crucial, I think. But there is a long way arising the opportunity and picking up the fruits and all the benefits at the end. But at the very beginning, all the architects, also me as a practicing architect, we have to face the first question, am I ready to export my services? And to answer all these questions, we prepared this brochure with very detailed pages and homepage and so on. So when you decide going abroad, then you make the first questions about researching the markets that you are entering, or how that market entry should be done by considering developing your strategy, how your human resources are set up, how you monitor your process, and also all those contractual matters that were raised by Jacques before. It's quite a complex thing. A new environment for the architect between him and the client, but also in many cases, if you team up with another local architect, there are differences in doing business, and there are lots of issues arising from that little differences. But I think Tobias, Elizabeth, and all those who already have the experience, they could tell long stories and experiences with regard to this. Yeah. Last but not least, also the financial issues that were already introduced are one of the key aspects of considering launching your business abroad. And this is from my side, these two brochures and publications that I wanted to highlight, and other aspects of our work group. And we are going to continue with a short discussion, I think.
Okay, thank you, Georgi, for the guide, the much-needed guide, because you do need support. And as we heard at the beginning, you did raise concerns when you registered about the local government regulations, and indeed the Architects' Council of Europe a few years ago asked you that very question. And we have a slide here that we'll now show you, because it shows some of the more detailed concerns. So there we are, the reasons for not working abroad. So on the left, this is from some of the directors, and on the right, that's individuals. So I'm going to ask Georgi and the working group to analyze this. Georgi, what strikes you when you look at those slides? If you'd like to put the microphone right. Yeah.
Oh, well, there are many things that you can read out of this slide, and I would like to refer one thing that I was introducing in the beginning, that obvious things are not so obvious if you look at the slides. I would like to highlight one thing. You see here answers from people who have been working abroad, and also answers from people who haven't been abroad. But the same question was given to the people in the questionnaire. And you see that, highlighted with different color, you see that depending on their previous experience, the people giving the answer are judging that those things maybe with a different weight in their answer. And if you follow from the beginning the given answers, you see that also, in all cases, the workers who haven't been working abroad, they give a higher...
They're more worried.
They are more worried. But if you look at the very end, when it comes to those 2 points, am I qualified to work abroad? Then those people who haven't been working abroad, they are more confident and see less risk in working abroad. And those people who have made their experience before, they are more worried about, because they already see the difficulties when they go abroad.
So that's your analysis. Excellent. Jacques, do you have something that you wanted to say about, as also a working architect? We've got this idea that there's perhaps more concerns about those who haven't worked abroad than those have, but then those that have see the greater issues because, of course, they've got the first-hand experience. Anything you'd like to add from your analysis?
No, I think in terms of the right-hand chart, I think that's quite perceptive in the sense, yes, until you get there, you don't really know what you're heading for, and then once you do, that's when you sort of start to confront those realities, and also I guess when you also realize that some of your fears are not as critical as they were, and there are things that you of course never really looked at. Yeah. But I guess also an observation on the left-hand side. Intriguing to see that there are almost 2.5 times the number of firms considering working inside Europe as working outside, and that's, I think, also an interesting question for us and for our audience as to, is export in Europe a first stepping stone to export outside of Europe?
Yes, baby steps before you go international or beyond the European Union. Absolutely. Philip, yes, your analysis.
Well, I have to agree on what my colleague said, but what I find interesting on the left-hand chart is when you look at these 2 bars, for me there seems to be still a big potential for architects working abroad, because considered working inside Europe, 15% said that they consider this, but just between 6 or 7% actually worked. So there's a large amount of people who considered working abroad but didn't do so. So I think
it's getting them over that last mile. Yeah. Yes.
And also what I find interesting, I mean, this is more complex than it appears, because we ask self-employed architects, owners and directors, and also employed architects. And when I look at the right-hand side, when it comes to relocation, for example, I think this is more an issue for those who are quitting their job and looking for a new job abroad. Because if you're a director of an architectural firm, you don't necessarily have to relocate to work abroad. It's more visiting the construction site. So maybe it would make sense to differentiate between those groups. Yeah. But it's interesting.
More surveys, although perhaps with all of the publications and the website and the guidelines and the checklists, there'll be the slide reasons for working abroad and an analysis of that. Or Gergely did make some reference to that. I liked the quote about built happiness. But I'd like to go to the audience. I'm looking at Gloria just to see whether our online audience who were putting questions in the chat, is there a question?
There are 2 questions. One is about copyrights.
Okay, so perhaps let's take the copyright one. I'm not sure whether we've got a copyright expert. I'd go to Philip, potentially. But we will have somebody, I think this afternoon we've got somebody who's talking about protecting your intellectual property rights. But let's just see what our working group can do, and we'll perhaps also hear from someone this afternoon.
Okay, and then there is another question about insurances.
Which were already mentioned. What was the exact question about intellectual property?
This person just would like to hear more about copyrights throughout Europe.
Okay, that's very broad. Is there anything succinct from your own experience that you would like to say? Otherwise, we'll leave that to the people from the European Commission this afternoon.
Yeah, I think it's always, I think, comes down to the individual contract, but I'm not sure about Europe-wide legislation in that respect. So we'll definitely hear more this afternoon, but I would also say, we have come across definitely in our practice tendencies where clients want to have ownership of copyright, And I think to some extent, not even necessarily knowing why, it's just a sort of form of control. And I think it's very important to understand what is really required, by the client and by the architect when asking for control of copyright, and how do we as architects also protect our interests in that respect.
Yeah. Philip, anything to add? There is
Actually,
DG Grow. They have these help desks, these intellectual property help desks in places like China and India, and they've set them up in Africa. And they can really give you a lot of information, but somebody from the Commission will talk about that.
Maybe one thought to those two questions. I assume that the person raising those questions has already experience in working abroad, because we found that these two issues are one of the two concerning things. You can also see in the questionnaire that insurance and PI is underestimated by unexperienced people, and people who already have the experience, they see the difficulty. There's another work group within the ACE called the Practice Committee, and there is a team of experts working on the insurance and the PI stuff. And we found that within Europe, there's a very big variety how these issues are handled within each member country. So it is even a big issue to handle and to make it to bring it on a uniform basis within Europe. And if you go outside Europe, you will have more complex questions with regard to these issues.
Philip, you mentioned insurance in your overview of the website.
When it comes to insurance, I think it's really important to have a good consultant, because we have made the experience in Germany. There are just a few agents who really know the international market. There are lots of people who might be helpful within your country, but when it comes to other countries, you really need a specialist who is up to date, because legislation can change and it's really a complicated task.
Excellent. Were there any other questions? Any questions in the audience, please raise your hand and a microphone will go round. Tobias, you should be answering the questions based on all of your experience, but perhaps that's what you're going to do. Is it a question or a comment?
It's a comment.
Okay.
Taxation. I don't know if it is, at least it's not within your questionnaire, but this is something that we find extremely challenging, because with every country, especially outside the EU, you have to understand this by the time that you give a quote. Otherwise, suddenly 50 or 60% of your fee is going to someone else, and then the whole thing is not worth it anymore. So has this been considered, and would there be any resources that we could use from your sides?
Is there a working group on taxation? Oh, that's a serious one.
Well, you're all looking to me.
Yeah, well, there we are, as the economist.
I think what he says is absolutely true, because very often taxation is done at the source of the income, not at the location of the architectural firm. And of course, you need to avoid double taxation. What can easily happen that you pay taxes double in the country where the construction site is and at home, and of course you need to avoid that. It's a complicated matter, so I see this as a future task for our group to have a closer look, because to give generic information that covers all countries is hardly possible. But it's an important task, and many of your colleagues have the same issue, I think.
Yeah, maybe one of the answers there, or initial answer there, might also be to quote for fees excluding taxation. That's certainly something we do. So if the VAT rate changes, your fees remains the same, because you quote for 10 euros plus VAT. So, but that's a sort of very basic line, I suppose.
Absolutely. Yes, please. A microphone will go round. Let us know if it's a comment or a specific question.
It's a bit of both, but I think one thing that we need to also consider, because this is focusing very much on the business aspect, I think, of internationalization, but there's also the regulatory aspect, particularly within the European Union, because it's heavily regulated. And I know I'm going to open up Pandora's box, and I'm not expecting you to address it here, but there's obviously an issue with scope of services and scope of reserved activities, particularly. So what an architect is required to do in Estonia may be different from what an architect is required to do in Portugal, for instance. So, but my main issue or my main question is, if you have, for instance, an international architect preparing a phase one, so conceptual design, etc., is in how many countries does that require you to have a license? You know, so there's a bit of a, I mean, in an unregulated industry, for instance, in Northern Europe, where this is all open, it works. But for instance, if I'll give an example of my country. So if say a star architect designs a project in Malta remotely, how compliant is that with professional qualifications directive, etc.? You know, so I think perhaps the regulatory part of this should also be studied. Maybe you have already, and I'm not aware of it, but my question perhaps is, have you considered this, and are there any plans if not?
Okay, Philip.
Yeah, when you look into our database, you find these questions answered in the country sections, because each country is different. In some countries, the title is protected, and as far as I know, for example, in Denmark, everybody could call himself or herself being an architect, so it's not protected there. So it's different in every country, and you need to have a closer look. But in our database, it's covered, and it tells you what does it require to be called an architect, what does it require to be allowed to perform as an architect, etc. But it's different each country, and when you look outside the EU, it even gets more complicated, of course. So I agree.
Yeah, Gergely, from your experience as an architect.
Yeah, some thoughts to these questions, also to the question with regard to the taxes. It's quite a global environment that we are working on within the work group. But we also found that there are global advisors who are also present in one or the other country as well. And for that reason, we also propose in our publications that you look for such partners who can help you with regulatory issues. It's recommended to find a local partner. However, global the thing is, you need local information. You have to find your partner. Also for that reason, we prepared those documentations that were introduced by Jacques, how you communicate with an architect who is actually in the same profession, but in a different world. So you have to find the same language also with your partner in that other country. And I think the good news is that to all those questions like tax or regulatory issues, there are partners who can help you. You have to look for those partners and you have to talk to them.
Yes, the microphone will go round. Is it a comment? Is it a question? And if it's a question, is there someone specific you would like to answer it?
Yeah, it's a comment, actually. So my name is Waldemar, and I'm the RBA Counselor for Europe. And I've been working on projects abroad for more than 20 years. And I fully agree, because you need a partner on the ground. So without a partner, it's extremely difficult. And I even know clients who are working in Germany, it's not easy. We have 16 different standards and different architectural chambers. If you go abroad, even if you follow your client, this is the most common way, then it's good to have someone on the ground, someone who knows the market, and of course is also registered and so on. And to find a partner, it's not so difficult. But to work abroad just as a standalone, it is extremely.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. All about partnerships and getting the right partner, as you were talking about, Jacques, in your presentation.
And I think as well it comes back also as architects to what Elizabeth was also presenting this morning, in terms of architecture also needs to respond to local considerations, and as much as we're trained to consider the architecture in a holistic manner, I think the only people on the ground who really there are some things that they know intrinsically, which coming from the outside you would always deal with in a foreign way, and that combination can also be interesting.
Excellent. I think we have time for one more question, if there is one more question. Anybody thinking of something that they really want to ask? We I don't see anybody's hand going up, although there is a very strong light, like an interrogation light right in front of me. So sometimes I can't see everybody in the room. So, to conclude, you've seen that there is all of that support there. If we look at this slide, as Philip pointed out, quite a lot have considered working inside Europe. We've heard what the Architecture Council of Europe has provided as services and is thinking that they might do in the future. This afternoon, we're going to hear from the European Commission, DG Grow, DG Trade, about what services they provide. And we'll also hear about these network groups. Philip is going to appear on the stage again with a different hat on this afternoon, because there are export agencies, but there are also networks of architects that can help you export your services. This afternoon, we've also got two more keynote speakers. One, very interestingly, is from the client perspective, but a very informed client because she trained as an architect or has a background in architecture and is involved in overseeing a multidisciplinary arts centre in Nairobi. So we'll get her perspective. And we're also going to hear from Robert Winkel, who's a Dutch architect, about some of the values that are underpinning his work in the Netherlands and also in the rest of Europe. But for now, let's take a long lunch from 12:15, coming back at 13:45 for this afternoon's session. Thank you very much.